like this. Okay. So if username and password is correct, but if he is an inactive user, then we want to fail the login. And if username or password anyone is wrong, then also we want to fail the login. And in case if username password is correct and active is 1, nothing but he is an active user. Okay, then we can just display the message, hello, your login successful. Okay, and your login type is on so, something like that. We want to just display some kind of information like that. One login application we want to create. Okay, so you can understand the application only with the flow diagram. But we want to create one simple login. In this example, what we create is, we create one simple service class. Actually, the service class, we are not writing any business logic, but we are writing one service class. We are writing one repository. We want to use a data JPA, and we also want to create an entity class. So basically, okay, we are just going to look into, or we are going to understand about an application in which controller, model, and view, all the three we want to cover in this example. It is called a login application. So how the flow will be? First, initially, the first page that the user has to get is a login page. Whenever user makes the request, for example, user is typing URL like this, HTTP. User is typing URL, HTTP : localhost : 8989 or 8080, whatever the port, /login. So when he enters this URL in the browser, this is a browser URL. When he enters this URL in the browser, then that guy will get, the user is going to get one login page. But how this user is going to get the login page for this? Again, the flow is same. There will be a dispatcher servlet. There is a handler mapping. There is a controller class. There is a view resolver. Then view. The flow is same. First request goes to here. It will stop the request. It will ask handler mapping. It will ask handler mapping, tell me which controller I need to call. Okay, this is asking the handler mapping, tell me which controller I have to call. So then it will identify based on the request URL and a URL map to the handler in a controller. It will identify the appropriate controller and will tell the dispatcher servlet. So dispatcher will next forward the request to controller. This controller will next is going to make a call to service class. But when initial request is for login, no need to call the service class. So without calling any service class, it is simply going to return the view name. The view name is login. So then it is calling the view resolver. This person is calling the view resolver saying that, so tell me what is the actual view for this view name. Okay, tell me the location and the extension. So then view resolver will add the prefix and suffix, will find the actual view location, and will provide a view object to the dispatcher servlet. Then it will execute that view object. It will call the render on view object. So then what happens now in that view, if any templates are there, if any tags are there, JSP tags are there, all the tags are get executed inside the server and they are replaced with the actual values. And finally, the total HTML content will be given to dispatcher servlet. The dispatcher servlet is finally going to give the response like this. This is a flow. This is a flow. This is a flow. I am cutting this, but to tell you, actually this is what happened. Finally, when a user enters at the URLs at the user side, if I talk, not at the server side. At the user side, when a user enters the URL in this address bar, browser URL, and when he press enter over the page, finally he is going to see his login. I am talking about a user point of view. In the login page, he has to enter some credentials. If credentials are success, Then the user will next see success page. If credentials are invalid, if username or password is incorrect, then again the user is going to see the same login page with a message. User is disabled or user is not active. Okay, or your credentials are invalid. Try again. Like that, we are just going to, we are not implementing any validations. We are just only talking about database. Just we are going to verify the database. We are not checking like username is entered or not, password is entered or not, password is containing 8 characters or not. Okay, at least 8 characters are there in the password or not. We are not discussing all those things. I mean, we are not writing all those things. We are not writing all those things. Right, okay? Then we have a submit button. Then we have a submit button. You got the point, right? We have a submit, which is how it works. Okay, right? This is login page. This is username and password. Then click on the submit. Okay, right? We are not checking whether username is entered or not. That is called input validations. That is data validations part we will see next. To tell you what are the annotations used to perform the validations. Then we will add validations also. So when we are working with the next timely, then I will also explain. Of course, it doesn't matter JSP or timely because validations we are going to at server side. By using some API. There is an API available called Bean Validation API. To perform server-side validations, we have to use one API called Bean Validation API. It provides some annotations, and this is one specification. It's called Java EE specification, and Hibernate Validator is its implementation, of course. So, but anyhow, this is an API that we are going to use. This API provides annotations, and with the help of them, we can perform the validations. That is next part, which means we are not discussing validations today. There are no server-side validations we are implementing here. So we are not checking whether username is entered or not, or password is entered or not. We are not adding all those things. Let us add them next. If I do everything in one itself, now only we will enhance the same application here step by step. But currently we don't have any validations. Okay. Now once he clicks on submit button, when user clicks on submit button, again the process will be same. Dispatcher select. Then we have something called what? Handler mapping, controller, service, repository. Again back to dispatcher select. Then view resolver, then view. The flow is same. So here what happens when you click on submit button, again the request. Who will stop this request again? Dispatcher select. Okay? DS. What it will do? It will call the handler mapping. It will call the handler mapping. It will call the handler mapping. What is saying handler map? What is calling and saying that ask? It is asking, tell me which controller I have to call. Next, it will forward or delegate the request to the controller. Now this time, the controller is also next going to call service. It is going to call which class? Service class. The service class is next going to call the repository. It is next going to call what? Repository. It will call the repository. So this repository will find out whether there is any login credentials are there with the given username and password. So the repository will fetch the user with the given credentials if username and password are matched. After fetching that, if the user is active, okay, the service will check, or simply service will, anything we can say. I'll tell you what is happening here. So it is going to fetch the data from database. Okay, applications like this. Now service calls repository for data. Now service will get the data. Through repository, it is fetching the data from database. Now the service can check whether user is active or inactive. Okay. So the service is going to return some, what I can say, it is going to return the user object Otherwise, the service can return directly string also, whatever it is. The service can even return the string also. It could be anything. The service can even return the string also. Okay, the service can return the string also. So what is happening now? Repository is calling the database. Now service is fetching the user from DB. Then service is returning that user back to the controller. Otherwise, service can return directly the string based on whether it is active or inactive, whatever it is. That message, it can return. Now this controller is now going to use, or the controller is going to check whether what is the message string. If, for example, user is active, the user and password is correct, user and password is correct. So then this controller is going to return view name to the disperser as success. Then it is calling the view resolver. What is saying in the view resolver? Tell me who is the actual view for this view name. Then view resolver will identify the actual view. It is next going to call the view. And finally, the DS is going to return, disperser is going to return a response. The response is a success. What is the response now? The response is a success page. Response will be success. You got the point now? Response is a success.jsp. That's good. Nice. If in case, what happens if in case, like, if, for example, the username or password is wrong, then the view is going to be failure. Okay, failure in the sense, again, not failure. Let's say login only. On the login page only, we will display message. What is the message? Your credentials are invalid, or the user is disabled, something like that. Means finally again what user is going to see? The user is now going to see the either success page or login page back. If again he gets login page, then on the login page we also display one message now. What is the message we are going to display? Your login, okay, username or password is incorrect, or you are a disabled. Now right now this is disabled user. Some message we can display. Okay, some message we want to display like that. So to do this, I need to add some if condition in my login page. I need to add some if condition in my login page. I will do some if condition in my login page. Okay, right? I will add some if condition, don't worry, in the login page. Based on if condition, either it should display the message or not, we will decide. Because initially when the login page comes to the browser, initially there will be no message because he has not entered the username and password. Initially the login page should not display any message. But when he fails, the username or password is wrong, or if the user is inactive, then only the login page should display one message also. So I will tell you like how we can write such kind of if condition in the login page. Some if condition we are writing, some Java code we write in JSP. And to write the Java code in JSP, we use a scriptlet tag. Scriptlet tag means it starts with 2 characters, less than character and percentage character. It ends with the percentage character and greater than character. Within this tag, this is our JSP tag. Within this tag, we can add some Java code here. We can add some if condition over there. Okay, right? Because we are using JSP right now. Next, when we enter into timely, we will see how to use the timely attribute to write the if condition. Okay, right? But right now I am going to include some Java code. Okay, this is how the complete flow will be. Now we can see almost entire complete flow is available on this screen. On the screen, you are able to see the complete flow. You can see the complete flow on the screen now. This is the flow. Right? And for this, we should start writing example today, so that we can cover not only writing the controller class, even we can write service class, we can write repository, we can fetch the data from database. So here in the repository, two options are there for me. I mean, suppose you want to execute a simple query, then you can use Spring JDBC. Using JDBC template, you can run a query on the database. Using JDBC template, you can run the query. You know, JDBC template is a class that can be used to perform database operations. You can run the query on the database by using Spring JDBC. Okay, that is good. Or else, if you want to use a data JPA, for example, we want to use data JPA, not JDBC, for example. Right? If I want to use Spring data JPA, then I should create one entity class and I should create one repository interface. So it's up to us whether we want to create entity class, then we want to create repository interface, or whether we want to use simple JDBC template class and fetch the data from database. That is also okay, right? Good. So what we do, we are already know about data JPA, so that's why we are going to Spring data JPA here. We will create one entity class. We'll create a repository interface for the entity class. To fetch the entities or to save the entity, to perform any CRUD operations on the entity, we need a repository. So entity class we are going to create, and for that entity corresponding repository interface also we are going to create. These are the two things I need to do while working with the data JPA. So we are going to create one entity class. We are also going to create one repository interface. So simply service is going to use repository to fetch the user data or credentials from the database. If the username is matched, because username is the primary key in the table. Based on username, fetch. Then the service will check. Okay, the service is going to check now. In that user object, the password and active values are what? Okay, and if password and active values are also matching, so then service will return the user object. Otherwise, service will return null value. Okay, like that now. So if username password is correct, but he is not active user, then it returns null. So if a controller receives null value from service, then it understands that okay, so there is a username password mistake is there, or he is not a active user, like that. Okay, we are going to just write some application like this now. So let's start working on this example. The complete flow diagram I will draw and I'll paste here, but right now first understand before we start adding the application. Okay, so first initially what the first page that the user has to get once he enters this URL in the browser, login.jsp. Okay, login.jsp. Once he enters this URL, he has to get a page called what? Login.jsp file. Okay, let's start working on this. But how he is going to get login.jsp? First request goes to dispatch select. Next, then it is asking handler mapping, then controller, then view resolver, then view. So this view is a login page that we prepare. This controller we prepare. But what about dispatcher select? What about handler mapping? What about view resolver? These are all pre-configured, automatically configured by the Spring Boot. Okay, this controller we create. This view we write. Here also same thing. In the same controller we create two methods. One method is to handle the login URL of the application, and one method is to handle the some validate URL of the application, something like that. Okay, credentials URL of the application, whatever it is. Okay, so in the same controller we create how many methods now? Two methods we are going to create. One handler, method means handler. One handler is mapped to login URL, another handler is going to be mapped to one more URL, like a credentials URL or check URL, something, login check URL, something like that. Okay, like that we are going to create two methods in the controller class. We create a service class, we create repository, we create entity class, and then we are going to test whether this application is working or not working. Let's start. So this is overall the application flow. First, this should be there in our brain, in our mind, so that we can start coding. Then I will put the flow diagram and all here. So there is no sign up button here, only sign in, nothing but what? Only login. Okay, only login. The next example we will see both operations, sign up and sign in. With the time leaf, we will do that. Right now, we are not using time leaf. Only just one more example for practice. Because just now only one MVC application we have created. So right now, at least one more example is needed for us so that we can understand the application flow. For that reason, again, I am creating one simple login application. Let's see how it is. Let's see how it goes. First, we should start creating the project. So let's enter all the required details. Okay. Login MVC, some application name, doesn't matter what name it is, login MVC. Properties, jar, everything same. Coming to dependencies, obviously we need web dependency. We also need a JPA dependency. Obviously we need Lombok dependency. And also we need MySQL driver dependency. So what are all the dependencies here? Web dependency, data JPA dependency, Lombok dependency, and MySQL driver dependency. In the next session, we will add one more dependency called DevTools dependency. What dependency? DevTools. That I will explain in the next example. Time leaf also we add for the next example. These are all for next example. What are the dependencies in the next example? We are going to add time leaf, and also we are going to add DevTools. I'll explain what is DevTools dependency meaning. Okay, then we also use time leaf as a view technology rather than JSP. So then in the next example, we are reserving it for next example. What and what? Time leaf and DevTools. So right now we are adding web, data JPA, Lombok, and MySQL driver. That's it. That's it. Generated. It's a simple example. So first, let's extract this. So that we can complete this example today. So I'm done. Let's open IntelliJ IDE. Let us open application here. Okay, now let's start working on this. Okay. Okay, look at this now. So first, in the pom.xml, we have all the dependencies. Just we look at once. One is a data JPA dependency, right? One is DataJP dependency, next one is Spring Boot Starter WebMVC dependency, next one MySQL driver dependency, then Lombok dependency. So all the dependencies are added and that's enough. Okay, this is the main important dependency for web and REST API applications. What is the starter? Spring Boot Starter Spring Boot Starter WebMVC. Okay, now next. This is the DataJP dependency and this is the MySQL driver dependency. This is the Lombok dependency. Am I clear with that? Nice. So all the dependencies are available here. I don't need to add any additional dependency over there. Next. Sorry. We are using Vue technology JSP. Jasper dependency we need to add, right? Sorry. Yeah. I told already, if your Vue technology is a JSP, you need to add the corresponding dependency. If your Vue technology is Thymeleaf, add the Thymeleaf dependency. So that is additional thing. So because Spring supports multiple Vue technologies and you have to decide which Vue technology that you want to use. And in case there is a Vue technology, then you need to add that template engine who can process the JSP tags. If you are using Thymeleaf as a Vue technology, then you have to add Thymeleaf dependency. Okay, that Thymeleaf template engine can process the Thymeleaf attributes like that. So Vue technology dependency we need to add manually. So who is our Vue technology right now? JSP. And for that, what is the dependency that you have to add now? Jasper dependency. So these are manual dependency we need to add. Dependency tag is there. Tomcat embed Jasper. Tomcat embed Jasper. Okay, right? You can see Tomcat embed Jasper is a dependency that you have to add. Group ID arg Apache Tomcat embed and artifact ID Tomcat embed Jasper. Then sync it. You have to sync it, right? This is the dependency. Why this dependency is added here manually? To include the JSP template engine. What is the name of the JSP processor? Jasper. Jasper is a JSP processor who can process the JSP tags at the server side. Okay, good. Now it's synced. Now we'll move on. First, we need to begin with. Okay, we need to begin with. First, I'm going to create. This is my package name. Okay, otherwise I'll rename it because the name is not looking good. Let's rename the packages. in.ashokit.app. Okay. Now let's start creating the one new package. The package name is entity. What's the package name? Entity. One more package also we create, obviously. Who is that? Repository. Repository. So first we should start coding from entity. Who is entity class we need? There is one entity class we need. Could be any name, but one entity class is needed. And I should map it with the table in the database. I told in my database there is a table, login credentials. What's the name? Login credentials. Login credentials. One table. Are you getting my point? Right. Okay. That table contains what? Username column, password column, and active column. How many columns I'm creating? 3 columns I'm creating. First one, username. Next one, password. Next one, active. 3 columns I have. So which means I need entity class to map it with the table now. Okay, let's do one thing. First I'll go to MySQL Workbench. I want to manually create the table. See, I want to manually create the table and I also want to insert record. When I'm inserting the record, username, password means normal text password only. In security, while working with the security, I will tell you how to insert the encrypted password. But right now there is no encrypted password, only text password. Okay, normal text password only. Password is just like visible to everyone. It is, I am not encrypting it and I am not putting in database. Okay, when you are working with a security API, so during Spring Security module, I will explain about encrypting the passwords and storing them in the database. But right now, only text passwords. I will create the table manually. Create table, table name, some name, login underscore credentials. Login underscore credentials. Create table. What's the table name? Login underscore credentials. Off. Login credentials off. What is the first? What is the first column I should specify? Username. Varchar. Varchar of 256. Password. Same. Varchar of 256. Okay. Next, I am also creating one more column. Active. Okay. In active, what I want to store? 0 or 1. Okay. So to store only 0 or 1, we have a data type called tinyInt. Okay, so there is tinyInt. Who is the primary key column in this? Now, obviously, username. Primary key of username. You got it right? Primary key of username. So what the table I am creating? Login underscore credentials with username, password, active, and primary key of username. This is my table. These are my columns. And who is the primary key column here? Username is the primary key column. Am I clear with that? Right. Now the table is created. Successfully created. Okay, table is ready. But the table does not contain any data. So let's insert some data. We want to make it ready. Insert into login underscore credentials. Values. Okay, username J capital John. Okay, password J capital John at 123. John at 123. That's a password. And he is a active user. One row inserted? Yes. Let's insert one more row. Alan. Alan at 123. 0. 0 means what? Inactive user. One more row is inserted. Right. So right now we have inserted just 2 records. Select star from login underscore credentials. Now I got to know that 2 records are there in my table now. Username Alan and username John. Username Alan is inactive. 0 means inactive. Username 1 active column 1 means is active user. Like that we want to maintain either 0 or 1 here. Okay, right. So currently the data is ready in the database table. Now let's start creating the entity class first. We want to start creating the entity class. Okay, let's start working with entity class. One new Java class we are creating. What is our class we are creating? some class, could be anything. I want to take my entity class name as login credentials. What's the class name? Now this is an entity class. How to mark it as an entity class? Add entity. One thing. If the class name is login credentials, JPA will map it to login underscore credentials because you have uppercase letter here. Okay. So what is the conversion that JPA will follow? It is going to check. It is going to map this with, by default, this class is mapped to a table called login underscore credentials. You can add in uppercase or lowercase, no problem. Underscore credentials. Okay. If there is a capital letter used in the middle of the class name, then it is mapped to underscore. This capital letter is mapped to underscore. So who is going to map like this? JPA. Now JPA by default maps this entity class with a table called what? Login underscore credentials. So our table name is also login underscore credentials only. Na? So that's why there is no need to again write which annotation over here at the rate table. It is not required. This annotation is not required. Why this annotation is not required? Because it is mapped to the table. The class name is mapped to the table. The table name is different. Then you have to explicitly map the class with the table by using annotation called what at the rate table. Next. Who is the primary key here? Username. Correct? Next. Password, right? Password. Right. Now we have data type tiny int, right? Here I have used a tiny int as a data type. Active is a tiny int. I think we can map with Boolean. Sorry, I think so, but anyhow, just for confirmation. We can use byte. The connector might also map it to an int, integer, Boolean, or Boolean. Depending on specific configuration usage. Okay. Okay, I'll take byte. Could be byte, could be Boolean also. Even I can also use it what? Boolean. Okay, if we get an issue, then we'll see. But right now, we are just going to work with private. Let's take byte. Active. Okay, right? Now these are my fields, and we also need constructor, setter, getter, all those things. So let's add with the no args constructor. Let's add all args constructor. Okay, let's add the data. Body na? entity, no args constructor, all args constructor, data. What are these? Are all the different annotations. These are called what annotations? Lombok annotations. So I have used all the Lombok annotations like entity, no args constructor, all args constructor, and at the rate data. At the rate data. Nice. Now let us try to create. Now entity class is okay. Okay, entity class is okay. Next. Repository we need to create now, so let's create a new repository. It's an interface, right? So what is our name? I'm just going to give login credentials repository. Okay, it extends JPA repository, CRUD repository. Currently we are not performing anything rather than CRUD operation. So I am just using CRUD repository. Okay, who is my entity class? Login credentials. Okay, first entity class name. Okay, comma. Next, what is the data type of the primary key? String. Now this is my repository interface. So entity class is ready, repository is ready, database table also ready, of course. Okay, now we want to start creating service class. We want to create what now? Service class. Let's create a new package called what? Service. And here we want to create one new Java class. I'm creating class only. Let's say login service. What is the class name? Login service. Okay, so how to mark that it is a service layer class? Head service. Head service. Service depends on repository. What I get at the rate auto void? Login credentials repository repo. We don't have any runner component now. We are not creating any runner. Okay, because at that time we don't have any MVC application. That's why we create a runner component to test whether save is working or not, find by ID is working or not, find all operations are. So how to test whether all those operations are working or not working when before we have entered into this MVC part, runner component. But right now there is no runner. Why not runner is because we are calling from service. We don't require runner component. So login credentials repository repo. Okay. Next. I'll get a method here. Public. Return type is login credentials. Okay. Method name is fetch credentials. Okay. Now what it's going to do? It's simply going to. It is first going to check. Okay. First it is going to call find by ID method. Which method? Find by ID. Repo dot. What is the method name? Find by ID. And what is required to fetch the credentials? To fetch the credentials, what is required? Username is required. Find by ID means only username. ID means primary key. ID means what? Primary key, right? Very good. So fetch credentials of username. String username, password. Otherwise, we will do this because again, I need to explain about something called as @request body annotation, but that request body annotation we will discuss in Spring REST API. But right now, just okay, we are doing it manually. What I'm trying to do now, simply string username, string password. It's a method. This method is going to accept how many inputs here? This method need 2 inputs, username and password. First it is going to call find by ID of username. Find by ID of what? Username. What this find by ID method returns, optional object. Optional object. Okay, right? Dot. Or else null. I'll tell you. First, I want to keep it in a login credentials object. In which object? Login credentials. Login credentials. Let's say, for example, login credentials is equal to. Step by step, you'll understand. Tell me, when this null will be returned by or else method? If, for example, there is no user with this username, then the optional object is empty. If optional object is empty, then what or else method returns? Null. Or else method will first check whether what this is, the value is present or not. If the value is present in optional object, returns that value. If not, returns what? Null. Login credentials value null means what now? There is no user in the table with the given username. If there is no user with the username, if there is no user in the username, then what's the result here? Null. So, if, look at this, if login credentials not equal to null, if it is not equal to null, then what to do? Means username is there. Means login credentials object is not null. But if only username is matched, then we can't say login success, right? We also need to compare what? Password. And also we need to compare whether he is active or not. So means I am going to check here. If what I am writing, if login credentials dot get password dot equals of password and login credentials dot get active equal to 1. Are you getting this point now? First, what happened here? Find by username only checks what? Username. But we also need to compare what? Password. We also need to compare what? Whether is active or not, right? So login credentials get active is 1. If this is okay, then what return? Login credentials. Return null. Now see the logic here. First one is what? If the login credentials is not equal to null, then come and check the next step. What's the next step? Next condition. Password is equal or not, and whether is active or not. Yes, then only return login credentials object to the controller. The service returns to controller. Else return what? Null. So means if this return statement is not executed, then this return will execute. Null return means what? If null is returned from this fetch credentials, what does it mean? If a null is returned means what does it mean? Null is returned means what does it mean? What's the meaning of returning null? User is inactive. User is inactive or password is wrong. That's the meaning of it, right? Okay, nice, cool. So now basically, this is the one method I created, fetch credentials. Now back to the controller class. In controller, okay, first let me create the package called controller. Tell me, this is controller class. In controller class, I am going to create two methods. Let's create my class name as login controller. So how do we mark it as a controller first? At controller. At controller. Now you can observe. controller is going to call okay. Now let's continue. So we have controller class. What's the controller class we are creating? Login controller. Login controller depends on service class because it's making call to service. So we have the login controller, and that controller is making a call to the service class. Okay, means how to make it as a dependency by using auto void. Means controller depends on service, service depends on repository. So at the rate auto void. What I am writing at the rate auto void of login service. Login service service. Just you can imagine at the rate service or at the rate auto void login service service. Now here is the actual methods. This controller. Okay, this controller should contain what? Controller is a place in which we can define the handlers. And we have to map. That's how we need to write the MVC application. We have to map a URL. We need to map a URL, a specific URL to the handler method. A specific URL to the handler method. Okay. Now let's see how we can do that. To map a specific URL to the handler method, we have annotation. Okay, there is annotation given. That annotation maps a specific application URL. It tells the application that what this is the URL and this is HTTP method that this method can handle. Okay, so for that we are writing annotation called what? At get mapping, at post mapping. In that way, good. Look at this. For example, first I am creating like this now. Public return type is string. Method name is get login page. Okay. Now, what this actually has to do? It no need to call any service or nothing. Simply return the view name of login. It should handle. This is the handler for a specific URL. Because in controller class, whatever method you create, each method is going to become a handler. Handler means it is the method who can handle one application URL. But which URL? We need to map it. So how to map that? By using annotation. What that annotation do? That annotation will map one HTTP method and a URL for the handler. So this is the method. This method in a controller class, you are creating a method, means it is called handler. And this is the method which is a handler method who can handle a URL, one URL of the application. Which URL? Application can contain many URLs. But how do you map a specific URL to this method, to this handler? By using annotation. Which annotation? Get mapping, post mapping, like that. Now we have a doubt whether I should use get mapping or post mapping here. How do I know that? First, I told in the flow. In the flow, I said when user enters in the browser URL for user is what? HTTP localhost : 8080 or 8989 anything /login. Where the user will type this URL? In the browser. Whenever he press enter, by entering this URL, the browser will send request to server. And the browser will always send a request to server with a specific HTTP method. Now, which HTTP method will be used for this request? That is get. Which method? Get. You can understand, if any URL is entered in browser, if user enters a URL in the browser and when he press the enter key, always the request will be sent to the server with HTTP get. The browser will use HTTP get method to send a request. Okay, right. Now we understood that what now? The request is coming to which URL of the application? Login. With which HTTP method the request comes to this URL? Get method. Now how to map it now? By using annotation. So which annotation is now going to be useful for me to map this URL with HTTP method get to handle that request by this method? Okay, how to map that to this handler method? By using annotation. Which annotation I have to use? Get mapping. Which mapping? Get mapping. Okay, so what this annotation get mapping tells the application? Now the annotation get mapping tells the application that this is the HTTP method and this is the URL, right? That this method can handle it. Okay. So which annotation can help me out? Get map. This is the annotation. It will help me out. Value equal to /login. So we have an annotation called get mapping. Basically what this annotation tells us Spring? It tells us Spring that this handler method is mapped with /login URL with a sheet method get. This is information given to Spring. What Spring will do now, whenever request comes to that login URL with a sheet method get, then it will invoke this method. Which handler method is executed for that request? Get login page. Get login page. Okay, right. Come to the point. Remember, in the controller class, the methods are executed through URLs. Normally, if a Java class is there, for example, if a Java class is there, in a Java class you have two methods. You have a class, okay? In class you have M1 method, M2 method. M1 method or M2 method. In a class you have M1 and M2 method. Now, you want to call M1 method or M2 method, one of the two. Not both the methods, either M1 or M2. Two methods are there, but you want to call only one method, either M1 or M2. M1 or M2. Okay. For example, Just I'm writing, just only explanation, just simple explanation. Right, okay? If x value is 1, then you want to call M1 method. If x value is 2, you want to call M2 method. Means what do you write now? You write an if condition, na? For the if condition, if x is equal to 1, then call M1 method. If x is equal to 2, then call M2 method. Normally in Java, you get this type of logic or not? Similarly, there is a method called get login page. And one more method I am creating here. One more method I am going to create. But how does the Spring will identify that I should call this method or this method? If the URL is, if the request URL is login, then call get login page method. If request URL is something else, then call the second method. Now, how to tell the Spring that this login URL is mapped to this method and this check URL is mapped to this method? Like that, how we can just tell the Spring? By using annotations. So which annotation tells the Spring like that? That you have to call this handler method for this URL and this handler method for this URL. Who will tell the Spring like that? Annotation. Which annotation tells? Get mapping, post mapping, put mapping, like that. Okay. Okay, good, nice. I'm not writing any logic here. Return login. Don't confuse here. You know, return type of a method. What could be the return type of a method in while creating the controller classes in Spring? I have given question on or string. So am I clear with this? I repeat again. What could be the return type? Model and view, or it could be string, any one of the two. It can be there is some. Yeah, hope you guys can able to see my screen now. See here. Model and view are string. This time what the return type I am using? String. And I don't have any data. But mostly which return type that we are going to use mostly string only. Not model and view is always what? String only. Okay. But what is the view name? Login. This is only view name. It doesn't tell about where is that view and what is the extension of this, which view technology and all. I told if you directly write login.jsp, something like that, then your application becomes technology dependent. Technology dependent. In future, if you want to same application but you want to change the view technology, then you have to modify the controller also. Yes, that's why the controller does not return actual view, only returns view name, logical name. This is called what name? Logical name, view name, but not exact view, only view name. Who will convert this view name, resolve this view name to the actual view? View resolver. It will find the location, it will find the extension, and it will tell that information to dispatcher server. That is view resolver, right? Good. Okay. Now come to the point. Assume that, okay. So again, imagination required here. Okay, at least I can explain. See, imagination required here. What is imagination? Suppose this is a login page. Example, this is what page now? Login page. In the login page, design is like this. We will design this. Tomorrow we'll design. The tomorrow's class will complete with the design. Then we enter into time leaf in place of JSP. It's a design. What user has to enter here? Username. User has to enter what here? Password. Assume that is a login page. Then he clicks on submit button. Then tell me the request will be sent now. Again the request will be sent. To whom the request will send from browser to server only na? Very good. Now the request will be sent to some URL. Okay, in the form design, you know HTML form tag. In form tag, what action attribute tells? You're writing action attribute in form tag, right? What action attribute tells? Action attribute tells the URL to whom this data should be submitted. The URL to whom this data should be submitted. That's what the meaning of action, right? Form action is equal to what I'm writing? Some URL. It tells about to whom I should submit my data. Am I clear or not? Yes, we will do that. Okay, good. But if the form has any sensitive information like password or card numbers or PIN number, something like that, then this data is submitted through HTTP post method. Sensitive data will be submitted through post. If the sensitive data is not submitted through HTTP post method, then this data becomes visible in address bar also. Where it's going to be visible? In the address bar. So if your password is there, if your PIN number is there, or credit card number is there inside the form, then all the form data becomes visible in address bar. That's why sensitive information should be sent in post request. What happens if I send the request in post now? The data is not visible in address bar. Otherwise the data becomes visible in address bar. If I enter some password here, if I click on submit button, then tell me if the request is sent through get method, HTTP get method, then what happens now? This form data will be clearly visible in address bar. Means everybody can see the password. That's why sensitive data must be sent through post method. Means when you're writing the form tag along with the action attribute, you are also writing one more attribute called what? Method. And what's the method you have to specify? Post. Otherwise it by default use get. Now finally we understood that the request is now going to be sent from the login page through HTTP method get or post. Post. Okay, the method should be post. Okay, good. To whom? I repeat. To whom the request is submitted to? To whom the request is submitted? To this URL. Specified in action attribute. With which method? Post method. Then we need a handler to handle this request now. Oh, okay. Now this action I am going to write in the JSP design. This action I am going to write as /verify. What is it? /verify. This action value I will write like this at the time of designing. Right now I have not designed it, but I am going to design it tomorrow. /verify. With the method what? Post. Now tell me when you click on the submit button, then the request is sent from client to server. With which method the request is submitted? The request is sent post method. To which URL? /verify. The action attribute is verify. Okay. Now tell me, here I am creating a method public. Return type is a string. Method name can be again verify or verify login, something like that. Verify login. Just understand this. I'll explain one by one. Verify login. Tell me which annotation I'm going to use here. Post mapping. What post mapping annotation? It is annotation used to map a URL and a post method. Am I right or not? Value is equal to /verify. Okay, right? Value is equal to what? /verify. Post mapping annotation we will import. Okay, right? Understand again. Tell me again. This should be in our mind. Just login page only. Login page contains what? One text box. This is to enter what? Username. This is to enter what? Password. This is to enter what? Submit. So here we have something called what? Username. This is called what? Password. Login. Login or submit. Something. Now tell me, when user clicks on submit, what and what data will be sent in the request? Username will be sent, password will be sent, and each data will be sent with a key. That is also called request parameter. In web terminal, this is called what parameter? Request parameter. Request parameter. One request parameter is username, another request parameter is what? Password. How many request parameters are submitted? Two. Each request parameter contains a name and its value. For example, the name of this request parameter is username. The name of this request parameter is password. Suppose you have entered username here, John. Password is John at 123. I'll conclude the class now. John at 123. Then tell me, what is the name of the request parameter which contains a username? Username is John. But what's the name of the request parameter? Request parameter is username. It contains value called what? John. Another request parameter is password. It contains value called what? John at 12. Now, to receive them to the method parameters here. I'm creating two parameters here. Username comma password. But one more. To receive them, what and what you want to receive? The value of username and password. And you want to receive them into these method parameters. Those values you want to keep them into these parameters, the method parameters. To receive and assign to these parameters, we have to use one annotation called request param. What is the annotation? Request param. At request param. At request param. So one more new annotation that we have learned today. What is the annotation? Request param. What this request param annotation will do? This annotation tells us Spring that capture the request parameter, put the value in username. Whose parameter? Username parameter. Okay, right? And also telling the Spring that what? Receive the password value and put it in password here. In the password variable. These two are local variables now. Method parameters are also called what variables? Local variables. Nothing but what you are binding. What you are binding? This first parameter, this method parameter, or this method argument, you are binding with request parameter. Which request parameter? Username. And this second method argument, you are binding with one more request parameter. Who is that? Password. So what's the annotation that can be used to bind this method argument with a one request parameter? At request param. If you do binding, then who will automatically put the value in that variable? Spring will do that. So you are telling the Spring, this is a method argument. We are binding with a request parameter. This method argument also binded to a request parameter. So who will take care of putting the value by taking the value from request parameter? Spring. So what is the new annotation that you learned here? At the rate request parameter. At the rate request param. What is the purpose of this annotation? It is used to bind a method argument to request parameter. Request parameter. Actually, you should write request param of username. Here also what request param of password. You should specify the request param name. Name of the request parameter you should specify here in this annotation as a value. Okay, but it is optional, because if you don't specify the name of the request parameter as a value, then by default Spring will assume that that name of the request parameter is also same as method argument. What's the method argument name? Username. Here also method argument name is what? Password. Did you understood now? Right. So now you tell me, this is mandatory to write now or optional to write? Optional to write. Okay. For the first example, we'll keep like that. In the next example, whenever it comes in, we will leave. So what is the new annotation you have learned here? Method request param. We will stop here. From here, we will continue and we'll finish this example in tomorrow's class. Okay. After that, again, we will see one more example. But in the next example, we don't use JSP. Instead of JSP, what we use? Time leaf. Time leaf. Okay. This example only login. By the next example, we will perform sign in, sign up. Both operations. Sign up and sign in. New users can sign up. Existing user can sign in. So we have the options called what? Sign up and sign in. We are going to do that. Okay now? Nice. So first let us complete this. Then we'll enter to time leaf. Then we will create a sign up and sign in application also, so that you can get some clarity on writing the MVC applications. Then we will see how to perform data validations. Okay? Right. From here I will continue tomorrow. Thank you. Start the next session. Let's continue this example on tomorrow.
Recording stopped.